The gun was already raised when the little girl stepped out from behind her mother's leg. She was small, no older than 5, maybe 6, with dark curls that clung to her temples and a smear of strawberry jam at the corner of her mouth. She wore a white nightgown with tiny blue flowers embroidered along the hem, and she looked at the man holding the weapon with an expression that was not fear. It was recognition. "Are you going to kill us?" Her voice was clear and unhurried, the voice of a child who had not yet learned to be afraid of the things that deserved fear. The question landed in the darkened kitchen like a stone dropped into still water, and every man in the room, 4 of them, trained ruthless, went utterly silent, but none of them went as silent as Dominic Carrera. He had not lowered the gun. His hand had not moved. His breathing had not changed. 20 years of iron self-discipline kept his body performing exactly what it was supposed to perform. But something had happened behind his eyes. Something cracked. Something shifted. Because the girl was still looking at him, and her eyes were the precise color of river water in winter, and they were shaped exactly the way his sister used to describe his own eyes when they were children. "Stormy," she used to say. "Like there's weather happening inside you, Nico." No one had called him Nico in 11 years. The woman in front of him, the one whose body was half shielding the child, the one whose hands were raised and trembling at her sides, made a soft, desperate sound. She pulled the girl back behind her. "Sophia. Right now. Mama. Now." The girl went. But she looked back once before the hallway swallowed her, and her eyes found Dominic's, and something in that brief passage of gaze opened a door in his chest that he had believed for 11 years to be welded permanently shut. He lowered the gun. "Everyone out," he said. His name, in the city, was said in a specific way, with a half-breath before it, a slight pause, the way you might say the name of a storm that had already arrived. Carrera. The Carrera family had run the eastern seaboard's most intricate criminal network for 3 generations, and Dominic had inherited it at 26 when his father was killed in a church parking lot on a Tuesday morning in November. He had been running it for 9 years. He had never lost a war. He had never broken a deal he intended to keep. He had never in 9 years pulled a gun on a woman and then put it away without explanation. His men were confused. He could feel it radiating off them as they filed out of the kitchen and into the dark yard. Their footsteps careful on the damp grass, their silence the particular silence of professionals who knew better than to ask questions. He stood in the kitchen alone. The room was small and scrubbed clean, the kind of clean that required real effort, the kind of clean that told you the person who lived here didn't have money but had pride. A crayon drawing was magnetized to the refrigerator. Red house, green tree, yellow sun, 2 figures, one tall, one small, holding hands beneath the sun's exaggerated rays. Beneath the taller figure, in careful block letters, Maima. Beneath the smaller figure, Mani. No third figure. He looked at the drawing for a long time. The woman reappeared in the kitchen doorway. She had dark hair pulled back from a face that was composed with tremendous effort. You could see the effort, the way you could see scaffolding on a building under repair. She was perhaps 27, 28. She wore a gray cardigan over pajama pants. There were dark circles beneath her eyes that had nothing to do with tonight. She looked like someone who had been surviving for a very long time. "Whatever Renzo told you," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I don't have it. I don't have any of it. I never did." Dominic pulled out a chair and sat down at her kitchen table. It was, he understood, not what she expected. "Tell me your name," he said. She blinked. "You came here with a gun and you don't even know my name." Renzo gave me an address. He gave me a debt figure. He gave me a description. He set the gun on the table, not threateningly. "Just set it down, the way you'd set down a set of keys." He didn't give me a name. "Tell me yours." A pause. She calculated something behind her eyes, risk, options, the narrow corridor between defiance and submission. "Lara," she said. "Alara Vasquez." Nothing in that name should have meant anything to him. It didn't. Not the last name, not the first. And yet he was still sitting at her table at 2 in the morning, instead of doing what he'd come here to do. And the reason was in a bedroom down the hall, asleep now, or pretending to be. "The girl," he said. "How old is she?" The stillness became something else, denser, more deliberate, like water turning to ice. 5, she said. "She's 5. He did the math. He had been doing it since the moment those green eyes found his in the kitchen light, since the moment something in his chest had cracked like ice in spring. He did the math and then he set it aside, because math required information he didn't have, and making assumptions about information he didn't have was how men in his position made catastrophic errors. "Her father," he said. "Not in the picture. Dead. Gone. There's a difference." "Not to us there isn't," Alara said, and for the first time since he'd walked through her door with 4 armed men at his back, he heard something in her voice that wasn't fear. It was exhaustion. It was the flat, absolute exhaustion of a woman who had answered this question too many times in too many different ways, and had finally boiled the answer down to its essential truth. Gone meant the same as dead when you were the one left behind. He looked at the crayon drawing again. "What did Renzo tell you the debt was for?" he asked. "My brother." She crossed her arms over her chest. Marco borrowed money from Renzo's operation 2 years ago. Marco has problems. He's in a program now. He's been clean for 7 months, but when he borrowed the money, she stopped, recalibrated. He borrowed 40,000. He paid back 31. Then he went into the program and the interest kept running and Renzo added fees, and now he says it's 96,000 and she pressed her lips together. I don't have $96,000. I have a job at a pediatric clinic. I have a 5-year-old, and I have a lease on this apartment that I pay on time every month. I don't have $96,000. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Renzo works for me, he said. She already knew this. He could see it in her face. The knowledge had been there since the beginning. It just hadn't been spoken aloud until now. I know, she said. He came to you first. 3 weeks ago. I told him what I told you. He sent 2 men to my clinic. They sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. There were children there. Her voice tightened around the last sentence. Children waiting to see doctors. And his men just sat there. So she exhaled. I found a number. For someone above Renzo. I left a message. You left a message for me, he said. I didn't know it was you specifically. I just knew it was someone above him. Someone who might. She stopped again. Someone who might listen. He finished. She looked at him. You came with a gun. I come with a gun to most places. He picked it up off the table and put it back in the holster at his side. I hadn't listened yet. The silence between them was different now. Still careful, still edged with wariness, but something had shifted in its texture. It was no longer the silence of predator and prey. It was the silence of 2 people who had both, unexpectedly, ended up in a conversation neither had planned for. I'm going to need to look at the numbers, he said. Renzo's accounting on your brother's debt. Why? Because I said so. She looked like she wanted to argue. He watched her decide not to. Okay, she said. He stood up. I'll be back tomorrow. She said it flatly. You're going to come back to my apartment. Les, with guns? Probably not, unless you do something between now and then that requires them. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. The girl's name. Alara looked at him for a long moment. Sophia, she said, and something moved through her face as she said it. A complex, layered something like weather across open water. Sophia, he repeated. He left. He didn't sleep that night. This was not unusual. Dominic Carrera had been running on 4 to 5 hours of sleep for most of his adult life, a habit born of necessity that had long since calcified into something permanent. What was unusual was the quality of the wakefulness. Normally when he lay in the dark his mind ran through logistics. Supply chains, personnel assessments, threat vectors, the 10,000 intricate gears of enterprise he'd inherited and built. Tonight his mind kept returning to a child's face in a kitchen doorway. Those eyes. He had seen photographs of himself as a child. Not many. His family had not been big on documentation. But a few kept in a shoebox his mother had left behind when she went, the shoebox now in the top shelf of his closet in the Riverside penthouse, untouched for years. In those photographs, a small dark-haired boy looked out at the camera with an expression of intense, slightly suspicious assessment that the people who worked for him now would have recognized immediately. And the boy's eyes, even in the faded, slightly overexposed photographs, were that particular shade of gray-green, like river water in winter. Stormy. His sister Elena had inherited their mother's brown eyes. He had been the only one with gray-green. His father used to say he got them from a grandfather who'd come over from somewhere in the old country. A man Dominic had never met, a piece of ancestry that had surfaced in him alone. A recessive trait, 1 in 4 chance of passing it on. He was out of bed before he'd consciously decided to be, standing at the window looking out at the city lights reflected in the river, and he made himself go through it. Methodically, without feeling, the way he processed threat assessments. Facts he had slept with someone, approximately 6 years ago, whose name he did not know. Or rather, a name he might have known briefly and then let go. Because he had been in a different place 6 years ago. A worse place. A place where human connection had felt like a liability he couldn't afford. He had been 29. He had been in the first years of consolidating power after his father's death. He forced himself to use the word, reckless, in specific ways, during specific months, when the pressure of what he was becoming had found its release in bars and hotel rooms, and one-night arrangements that he had ended cleanly and without cruelty but ended nonetheless. 6 years ago, a child who was 5, he stood at the window for a long time. Then he made a call. I need a background search, he said when his head of intelligence answered. A woman, Elara Vasquez. Pediatric clinic, Eastern District. I need everything, employment history, family, medical records if you can get them. And I need it by 8 a.m. A pause. Medical records specifically. The child's birth records, he said. Feather listed on the certificate. Another pause, longer this time. Martyr stood. Marcus said and hung up. Dominic put the phone down. He looked at the river. She has his eyes. The thought came back to him. Not in his own voice, but in the voice of Antonio, his driver, who had been standing in that kitchen doorway, and who had said nothing but, whose expression had said everything as Dominic lowered the gun. Antonio had been with the family for 22 years. He had known Dominic since he was a boy. He had seen the photographs in the shoebox. He knew what those eyes meant too. Alara did not sleep either. She lay in the narrow bed beside Sophia, listening to her daughter breathe, the deep, untroubled rhythm of a child who had asked a terrifying man if he was going to kill them and then, apparently, filed the experience away under interesting things that happened and drifted peacefully to sleep. Sophia had always been like this, fearless in a way that alternately filled Alara with pride and dread, because the world had a way of punishing fearlessness in girls, and Alara had been trying, for 5 years, to teach her daughter to be brave without being reckless, to be open without being exposed. It was hard to teach a thing you were still learning yourself. She looked at the ceiling in the dark and thought about the man who had sat at her kitchen table. She had expected someone like Renzo. Thick-necked, dead-eyed, the kind of man who carried a gun because he lacked the subtlety for any other kind of threat. She had prepared herself for that, had rehearsed the conversation, had decided exactly how much she would concede and where she would hold her ground. She had not prepared for Dominic Carrera. She knew the name. Everyone in the Eastern District knew the name. The way you knew the names of weather systems and geological faults. Not because you'd encountered them directly, but because their consequences shaped the landscape you lived in. She knew he was young for what he was. She knew he was ruthless. She knew he had never been photographed at a crime scene because, as far as anyone could tell, he was careful enough that he was never near a crime scene. She had not known about the eyes. She stared at the ceiling and the familiar sick feeling moved through her. Not guilt, exactly, because guilt required a belief that she had done something wrong, and she had made her choices deliberately, for reasons she still believed were right. What she felt was more like the feeling of a fuse burning, the knowledge that something inevitable was approaching, that the careful architecture she had built around her life and Sophia's life had a structural flaw she had always known about and had been managing, carefully one day at a time for 5 years. She had found him, once. 6 years ago, not long after that night. The one that had produced Sophia, the one that Alara still thought about with a complex tangle of emotions she had never fully sorted. She had found a way to reach him, through a mutual contact, through a chain of carefully handled questions. She had gotten as far as a phone number. She had not called it. She had made her decision, and she had made it for reasons she had rehearsed many times in the years since she hadn't known him. Not really. It had been one night. He was dangerous. She could not bring a child into that world. Sophia deserved safety and stability and a mother who wasn't always watching the door. She had made her decision and she had lived with it, and she had built something real. Small but real. Solid but real. Hers and Sophia's. From the materials available to her. And then Marco had borrowed money from Renzo's operation and the world had closed its fist around her careful, solid, real little life. She turned her head and looked at Sophia in the dark. Her daughter's face in sleep was perfect and unguarded. The dark curls fanned out on the pillow, the small mouth slightly open. She had Alara's nose and Alara's stubbornness and her grandmother's laugh. She had, inarguably, her father's eyes. He saw it, Alara thought. The moment he looked at her, he saw it. She pressed her hand to her sternum, as if she could hold the fuse in place by pressure alone. She had until tomorrow to figure out what to do. He came at noon, as it turned out. Not at some threatening pre-dawn hour, not with an entourage, but at noon on a Thursday in civilian clothes alone. Dark jeans, a gray shirt, a jacket that probably cost more than Alara's monthly rent. He knocked. She had spent the morning composing herself. Sophia was at Mrs. Reyes's apartment downstairs. Alara had dropped her off early, told her it was a work thing, watched her daughter accept this with the easy trust that Alara worked every day to deserve. Then she had cleaned an apartment that was already clean, made coffee she didn't drink, stood at the window, and rehearsed things to say. When she opened the door, she said none of them. He held out a folder. "Your brother's ledger," he said. Renzo's version and the actual numbers. She took it, stepped back to let him in, because what else did you do? He sat at the table again, the same chair as last night, as if he'd claimed it. She opened the folder and spent several minutes reading, and as she read, something cold and clarifying moved through her. He added $40,000 in fees, she said. Fabricated fees. Renzo has been doing this with 6 accounts in the past 8 months. His voice was flat and controlled. Your brother's legitimate remaining balance, with standard interest, is $14,200. She looked up. 14,000. Which your brother can pay in installments over 18 months, at no additional interest, through an account I'll have set up this afternoon. He paused. Renzo is no longer in a position to collect anything. She understood what that meant. She chose not to ask what it meant precisely. Why? She said instead. Because he was stealing from me, Dominic said, and because he sent men to sit in a waiting room full of sick children. She searched his face for the angle. There was always an angle. She had learned this early, living in the margin between the legitimate world and the one that operated in the shadows behind it. Nothing came without a price. Nothing was given without expectation. And men who looked like Dominic Carrera did not come to your kitchen on a Thursday noon to tell you your debt had been reduced by $80,000 because they felt magnanimous. She waited. He looked at the refrigerator. Her birthday, he said. When is it? And there it was. The fuse reached the end of its burning. Elara put the folder on the table. She sat down across from him. She looked at him directly, the way she had trained herself to look at things that frightened her. With the steady attention you gave to a wound that needed to be examined before it could be treated. How much do you know? She asked. I got her birth certificate this morning. He was looking at the table, not at her. Father listed as unknown. It was, she said, technically. I didn't know who I am. I didn't know your name that night, she said. I found it out later. After. Something moved across his face. After you found out you were pregnant. Wes. A silence. You didn't contact me. She had prepared for this moment. She had lived inside this moment in her imagination for 5 years, had imagined it coming from 100 different directions. A stranger on the street who turned out to know him. A photograph in a newspaper. A conversation she couldn't control. She had never imagined it coming like this, in her own kitchen, with the crayon drawing on the refrigerator and his hands flat on her table, like he was keeping himself anchored by pressure alone. No, she said. I didn't. Why? She looked at him. You know why. You met her eyes. Say it. Because you are what you are, she said. And she kept her voice even, and she meant every word. Because I had to make a choice about what kind of life Sophia would have, and I made it. I'm not apologizing for it. I made the best decision I could with what I knew. He was quiet for a long moment. She watched him process it. Watched the internal machinery of a man who was very good at controlling his external presentation work through something it had no prepared protocol for. She's mine, not a question. Yes, she said. The word sat between them. She's 5 years old, he said. Yes. I've missed 5 years less. She held his gaze. And I understand if you're angry. I understand if. I'm not angry, he said. It was the last thing she expected. He stopped. He put his hands flat on the table and she saw, for the first time, something that was not control in his face. Something raw and unprocessed, like a wound that had just been uncovered. I don't have a word for what I am right now. She didn't either. They sat in that shared wordlessness for a while, the two of them, in the small clean kitchen with the crayon drawing on the refrigerator, while the implications of truth settled around them like snow. He came back the next day, and the day after that, not always with a plan or a purpose. Sometimes with a reason that was transparently constructed, a document he needed to sign, a question about the debt arrangement that could have been handled by phone. She understood what he was doing. She was doing the same thing herself, in her own way, circling the fact to him, the fact of them, the fact of Sophia, approaching it carefully from different angles, because a direct approach would require a reckoning she wasn't sure she was ready for. On the 4th day, Sophia came home from Mrs. Reyes's apartment while he was still there. Elara had been expecting this, had been half hoping it would happen and half dreading it, and she had not engineered it, but she had not prevented it either, which was its own kind of decision. The door opened. Sophia came in at her customary pace, not running, but purposeful, a child who had opinions about locomotion. She stopped when she saw the man at the table. She regarded him. He regarded her. You were at night. Les, he said. With the gun. Sophia. Elara started. Yes, he said again. Did you put it away? I did. Good. Sophia appeared to find this satisfactory. She set her small backpack on the chair by the door with the careful deliberateness of a person attending to important business. I'm Sophia. I know, he said. What's your name? Elara's breath caught. He said. Sophia considered this. That's a long name. It is. My friend at school has a long name. Maximilian, we call him Max. She looked at him with those unnerving gray-green eyes. Can we call you Dom? Something crossed his face. A flicker of something that might, in another man, have been described as tenderness. In Dominic Carrera, it looked more like the first visible crack in a long, sealed wall. You can call me whatever you want, he said. Sophia nodded, satisfied. Do you want juice? Mama has the good kind. Orange with no pulp. I would like that. She went to the refrigerator. Elara stood in the kitchen doorway watching her daughter matter. Of factly poor juice for a man who had walked into their home 5 nights ago with a weapon, and she felt the complex truth of this moment settle over her like a weight. Not crushing, but present, significant, demanding to be felt. Sophia handed him the glass. She climbed into the chair beside him, not across, beside, with the proprietary ease of a child who had not yet learned that space belonged to adults. She put her elbows on the table. Why were you here at night? She asked. Sophia, Elara said. 'Cause I had made a mistake, Dominic said. And I was trying to fix it. Sophia considered this. What kind of mistake? I trusted someone I shouldn't have trusted. Like when I trusted Kamala not to tell anyone about the birthday surprise and she told everyone? Sophia said. Similar concept. He said. Sophia said. I was so angry, but then I forgave her because she said sorry and I believed her. That was generous of you. Mama says being generous is hard, but it's worth it. Sophia picked up her juice glass and looked at him over the rim. Are you gonna come back? Ilara's heart sat very still in her chest. Yes, Dominic said. If your mama says it's okay. Sophia looked at Ilara. They both did. Ilara looked at her daughter's face. Open, curious, those gray-green eyes. And then she looked at the man beside her daughter, and for the first time in this impossible week, she let herself see not the threat, not the power, not the history and its complications, but simply the way he was looking at Sophia. The way a person looks at something they already love and are only just now recognizing that they love. It's okay, she said. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Ilara's life, and her life had contained a significant amount of strangeness. He came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always in the afternoon, always after school. He never came empty-handed, not gifts, not extravagances, nothing that would imply an attempt to buy his way into something, but practical things. A book Sophia had mentioned at school, a small succulent for the kitchen windowsill because Ilara had mentioned once that she liked plants but always killed them. He learned, without being obvious about learning, what mattered to them. He and Sophia developed a ritual. She would tell him about her day in precise, digressive detail, the full account, including tangential stories about other children's lunches and disputes over playground equipment, and interesting things she had observed about clouds. And he would listen with the complete, undivided attention of a man who had learned to pay attention as a matter of survival, and was now redirecting that attention towards something that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with want. Ilara watched from a careful distance. She watched and she felt the familiar fuse burning, and she tried to determine whether what she was watching was safe, not in the physical sense, not anymore, but in the deeper sense, the sense that mattered most. Whether this was something she could allow, whether allowing it was fair to Sophia, whether it was fair to her, whether it was something she wanted for reasons other than Sophia. That last question was the one she spent the most time with. On a Tuesday evening in the 4th week, after Sophia had gone to bed, she and Dominic sat across from each other at the kitchen table with cups of coffee going cold between them, and he said, "Tell me about that night." She looked at him. "The night we met," he said. "I need you to tell me, because I have." He stopped, pressed his lips together. The careful composure cracked slightly at the edges. "I have pieces. I have a hotel bar, a conversation about something art, I think." And then, he shook his head. "I wasn't in a good place. That year, I'm not offering that as an excuse." "I know," she said. "You just lost someone." He looked at her sharply. "You mentioned it," she said. "That night. A brother, you said. You mentioned a brother you'd lost the year before." "Marco," he said quietly. "Not her brother, his brother." She watched the name land in him. "Marco. Sorry." He was 23. A pause. "I was 29 and I had been carrying the weight of everything for 3 years, and that night he exhaled. "Wasn't careful. In a lot of ways. Neither was I," she said. "I knew who you were by the end of the conversation. Not your name, but what you were, and I didn't leave." "Why didn't you leave?" She thought about how to answer this. She had answered it to herself 1,000 times, in 1,000 different framings, and the truest answer was also the most complicated one, so she gave him the truest one, because you were the most awake person I'd ever talked to. The most present. Like there was nothing in the world except that conversation, except me, except that moment, and I had been invisible for so long. She looked at her hands. That was a dangerous thing to offer someone like me. He was quiet for a moment. "I remember that," he said. "Not the details." His voice had changed, gone quieter. "I remember feeling like I was actually in something. Not just going through the motions, not just managing." He turned the coffee cup in a slow circle. "Sorry I wasn't there." "You didn't know." "No. But I should have been someone who was worth finding." He looked up at her. "I'm trying to be that now." She looked at him across the table, at his face, which was doing the thing it always did now when they were alone. The thing where the control was still present, but the architecture beneath it showed, all the load, bearing weight of who he was and what it had cost him. She thought about the fuse that had been burning for 5 years. She thought about walls and the reasons for them and the difference between a wall that protects and a wall that imprisons. "I know," she said. The threat came, as threats usually did, without announcement. It came in the form of a man named Salvatore Voss, who had been watching the Eastern District's restructuring with the cold calculation of a predator watching an ecosystem for signs of weakness. Voss was not in Carrera's organization. He was not in anyone's organization. He ran his own enterprise out of the Port District, lean and flexible and patient, and he had been patient for 8 years, waiting for a moment when the Carrera operation showed a vulnerability he could exploit. He found it in an unexpected place. The first sign was a photograph. It arrived in a plain envelope at Dominic's office on a Wednesday morning. Delivered by courier, untraceable. Inside, a single photograph Elora and Sophia on their walk to school, taken from a distance, slightly grainy. Sophia's face in profile. The distinctive eyes. and written on the back, in careful print, interesting family resemblance. Dominic sat with the photograph for 47 seconds before he made the first call. I need full surveillance on the Vasquez apartment. Starting immediately. I need a 4-man rotating detail and I need Marcus on this personally. He paused. Nobody touches my phone. Nobody intercepts my communications. Find the courier. He made 4 more calls in the next 3 minutes. By the end of the 4th call, the city was already moving differently. The invisible machinery of the organization he had built reconfiguring itself, prioritizing, locking down. Then he drove to Alara's apartment. He hadn't planned to tell her. He had, in the 47 seconds of staring at the photograph, considered the option of handling it quietly. Solving the problem before she was aware of the problem, which was how he solved most problems, efficiently and without involving people who didn't need to be involved. This was the instinct of 9 years: manage, contain, resolve. But she was Sophia's mother, and Sophia was. He parked the car and sat in it for a moment, looking up at the lighted window of the apartment. Sophia was his. He had known it scientifically for weeks now. From the birth certificate and the dates and the green eyes and the DNA test he had ordered and received and stared at for a long time in his office on a Tuesday morning. He had known it emotionally since the moment he'd looked at a small girl in a nightgown and felt something in his chest break open like ice in spring. But in this moment, sitting in the car with a photograph of his daughter on the seat beside him, he felt it as something even more fundamental than knowing. He felt it in the animal way, the way something feels when it has always been true but you have only just become available to receive it. He went upstairs. Alara opened the door and read his face immediately. She had developed an alarming proficiency for reading his face in recent weeks, which was itself a thing that unnerved him in the best possible way. "What happened?" she said. He handed her the photograph. She looked at it. He watched the color leave her face, which was composed and steady, but her hands. She didn't entirely control her hands. She said, not a question. "He's informing me that he knows they exist," Dominic said. "Which is its own kind of threat." "Who is he?" "Vos. Salvatore Vos. He runs the Port District." He watched her process this. "He's been waiting for me to have something to lose. And now you do," she said. The words sat between them in the quiet apartment. From down the hall came the sound of Sophia talking to herself in that self-sufficient way she had, inventing some small domestic world behind her bedroom door. The sound of a child who did not yet know that the actual world had just contracted around her. "I want to move you," Dominic said. "Somewhere safer. A property I have. It's outside the city. Secure." "No," Alara said. He stopped. "Sophia has school. I have work. I have a life." Her voice was even, but underneath it was steel. "I understand the danger, I do, but I won't let her world be dismantled because of this. Alara, you can protect us here," she said. "Or you can protect us there. The geography isn't the variable, Dominic." She looked at him directly. "You are." He had been running a criminal organization for 9 years. He had been negotiating, strategizing, managing threats and alliances and the constant delicate pressure of maintaining power in an inherently unstable world. He was not unaccustomed to being challenged. He was not accustomed to feeling that a challenge was right. "The building. I need to own the building." "What?" "Your lease. Your landlord. I need to own this building within 48 hours so I can control who comes and goes." He was already thinking through it. "I'll pay fair market value. Your rent doesn't change, but I need control of the physical space." She stared at him. "You're gonna buy my building." "Less. In 48 hours, probably less." And she looked at him for a long moment. Then, helplessly, she started to laugh, a short, startled laugh, like something surprised out of her. "Of course you are," she said. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," she said, and then the laughter faded and what replaced it was something more serious, more searching. "What are you going to do about Voss?" "I'm going to make it very clear to him," Dominic said carefully, "that what he found is not a vulnerability." "What is it then?" He looked toward the hall, toward the sound of Sophia's voice behind the closed door. "It's a reason," he said. The next weeks were tense in a way that Alara felt in her body. A low, grayed hum of alertness that she carried to work and back. That made her count the faces on the street. Notice the car parked across from the clinic 2 days in a row. Note the new neighbor in the building, who she was 90% sure was one of Dominic's people. He was good at this. She had to admit it, even as everything in her resisted the admission. He was extraordinarily good at the kind of quiet, comprehensive protection that left no fingerprints. The surveillance was there but invisible. The security around Sophia's school was there but unobtrusive. He had, in fact, bought the building in 36 hours, and the new building manager who appeared the following week had the precise bearing of someone who was very good at noticing things. She was safe. Sophia was safe. The world continued to move normally around the invisible infrastructure of safety he had installed. And he continued to come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because Sophia had started expecting it. "Dom is coming today," she would announce in the morning, with the certainty of someone reporting a meteorological fact. "He's going to help me with my reading project." "He told you that?" He texted. "Hey, When did you get his number? He gave it to me. A pause during which Sophia ate cereal with complete equanimity. He said I could text him if I had questions about anything important. Alara looked at the ceiling. Important like what? Like if I wanted to know something, or if something was scary, or if I needed someone at school things. Sophia looked up. He came to my recital. Alara had known about the recital. She had not known he came. You didn't tell me that. You were in the front row, Sophia said. He stood in the back. He didn't want to make it weird. She said weird in the particular way she said it. Inherited wholesale from a classmate. But he saw me do the starfish pose. Alara set down her coffee. Was there for the starfish pose, she said. He said it was excellent, Sophia said. His exact words were technically flawless. She appeared to find this assessment satisfying. I think he was proud. The word landed quietly, proud. Alara sat with it for the rest of the morning. The confrontation with Voss came on a Friday, which was not a day that had any particular significance, but which would thereafter carry the weight of everything that happened in it. It started with a phone call, Dominic's number, but not Dominic's voice. Mr. Carrera is currently unavailable, said the voice on the other end, and Alara recognized the careful flatness of it as something professional, something ominous. There's been an incident at the Port District. He asked me to contact you. He's not injured. He wanted to make sure you knew that first. He also wanted you to stay inside today. Both of you. She stayed inside. She kept Sophia home from school, told her it was a special day, a movie day, let her choose every film. And they built a fort from couch cushions and watched animated movies under blankets. And the whole time Alara's phone sat on the cushion beside her, and she was aware of it the way you're aware of a nerve that's been exposed. At 3 p.m, the phone rang. It's over, Dominic said. His voice was steady, but she could hear fatigue in it, deep fatigue, and something else she couldn't name. Voss won't be a problem. What happened? Not on the phone. A pause. I'm coming over. Les, she said. Come. He arrived an hour later. He looked like a man who had been awake for 36 hours and had spent them doing things he would never fully describe to her. She accepted this, understood this, had arrived at a pragmatic peace with the specific shape of who he was. He sat in his usual chair at her kitchen table, and Sophia crawled into the chair beside him and put her head against his arm, which she did now sometimes, with the casual ease of a child who had decided something and enacted it. He looked down at her. His face did the thing. Are you okay? Sophia asked, muffled against his sleeve. Better now, he said. Alara made tea. She moved around her small kitchen, and she felt the 3 of them in it. The weight and presence of 3 people who had somehow become a thing, who had arrived at this arrangement through chaos and coincidence and 5 years of a secret she had been keeping and now no longer needed to keep. And she felt the complicated grief of the years that had already passed, and the complicated something else of the years that were ahead. He tried to use them, Dominic said quietly, after Sophia had fallen asleep against his arm. Voss. He had people watching the school. He wanted me to know that he could. He stopped. His jaw tightened. I want you to understand that I handled it in the way that I didn't. He struggled with something which was rare, visible struggle for a man for whom control was a reflex. No one was hurt today. I want you to know that. She looked at him. I believe you. I almost. Another stop. There was a moment where I could have done something that would have been. He shook his head. Irreversible. But you didn't. No. He looked at Sophia asleep. I thought about her waking up and asking me something and He exhaled. I found another way. She set the tea down on the table. She sat in the chair across from him, the one she always sat in, and she looked at him looking at their daughter, and she thought about walls and fuses and choices made in the dark for reasons that seemed sound at the time. Dominic, she said. He looked up. I'm sorry, she said, for the 5 years. I know I've explained it, and I know you said you understood, but She held his gaze. I'm sorry you didn't know her when she was 1. When she was 2 and 3 and 4. I'm sorry you didn't know about her. Whatever my reasons were, I'm sorry for what it cost you. He was very still. It cost you too, he said. Yes, she said. It did. Another silence, but it was the kind of silence that was full rather than empty. Full of everything they hadn't said yet, everything they had been carefully not saying while they circled each other in her kitchen on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I don't know how to do this, he said. Whatever this is, I've never. He turned the teacup in his hands. I have never had anything I wasn't willing to lose. As a strategy, as a way of keeping power. You don't lose the things you can't afford to lose by not having them. He looked at her. I had a lot of rules about that. I know, she said. Sophia broke all of them in the first 30 seconds, he said, with the orange juice. Something warm moved through her chest. She does that, Alara said. Different, his voice had changed. Careful now in a different way, not the careful of a professional but the careful of something genuine. It's not the same, with you he stopped. Then, with the precision of someone who has been thinking about how to say something for a long time. It's the same feeling. But it's not the same because you're you and you have your own. He shook his head. I'm not good at this. You're doing fine, she said. I want more Tuesdays and Thursdays, he said. He looked at her steadily. I want to ask you something, but I want to ask it the right way. Not because we're afraid or because it's practical or because of Sophia, but because… Dominic. Les. Ask me. He looked at her across the table. In the soft kitchen light, with Sophia sleeping between them, he looked like something she hadn't expected. Not the man with the gun. Not the power. Not the intricate, dangerous architecture of who he'd built himself to be. He looked like someone who was afraid, specifically and vulnerably afraid, in the way that only the things that matter most can make you afraid. Can I take you to dinner? He said. Just the two of us. Not a talk about anything complicated. Just a pause. Dinner. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, yes, and Sophia, apparently not as asleep as she appeared, said without opening her eyes, finally. The dinner was not just dinner. It was a Friday evening in October. The kind of evening that exists in the memory afterward as a series of sensory details rather than a narrative. The weight of the air, still warm from the day but carrying the first edge of autumn, the candlelight on the table between them, the particular quality of his attention, which she had been aware of for months now, and which she was only tonight allowing herself to accept rather than analyze. They talked about nothing. They talked about everything. She told him about the patient she'd been seeing for 3 months, a 4-year-old with a complicated diagnosis, the way the parents held themselves in the waiting room. He told her about a building his grandfather had owned in the old neighborhood, torn down now, that he still thought about. The wood smell of the staircase, the way the light hit the landing in the afternoons. They talked about Sophia, her current obsession with a specific breed of fish she'd seen at the aquarium, her recent philosophical inquiry into what dreams were made of, the book she was currently dictating to Alara, chapter by chapter to be illustrated later. She told me the plot, Dominic said, 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure she's aware that the main character is you. She's aware, Alara said. The main character is very brave, he said. Fights a dragon using logic. Of course she does. The dragon is called Mr. Worry. Alara looked at him. She told you about Mr. Worry. He looked back at her steadily. We talk. She felt the thing she had been holding at arm's length for weeks, months, move closer. The thing she had been calling complicated and premature, and logistically questionable in her internal conversations. The vocabulary of a woman constructing reasons to be sensible in the face of something that was not. Primarily sensible. She's told me about the nightmares, he said quietly. She has them sometimes. About Mr. Worry. She says she doesn't tell you about them because you already worry and she doesn't want to add to your pile. Alara's throat tightened. She's 5, she said. She's your daughter, he said. She's protecting you. She looked at the candle on the table. She thought about her daughter in her nightgown on the kitchen floor, asking a man with a gun if he was going to kill them, with a voice that had no fear in it because she had decided, on some cellular level, that fear was not useful. She thought about what it cost to be that fearless. She thought about how much she had tried to carry alone. For Sophia, how much Sophia had tried to carry back. For her, this invisible weight traded between 2 people who loved each other so much they had each been quietly suffocating under the load. I've been doing it alone for a long time, she said. I know, he said. I'm not good at asking for help, or accepting it. I know that too. I made a choice 5 years ago that I still believe was the best available choice at the time, she said. But I've been paying for it in a specific way, which is that I've been carrying something I wasn't built to carry alone, and I made myself believe that I was fine, that we were fine. You were fine, he said. You built something real. You gave her something solid. He leaned forward slightly. Don't rewrite what you did as a mistake. It wasn't you made her who she is. She looked at him. But now, he said carefully, you don't have to do it alone. She had been waiting, she realized, for the condition. The but that preceded the terms, the price, because in her experience, in the experience of a woman who had grown up in the margins of things, who had learned early that offers came with strings, there was always a price. He didn't name one. He just looked at her across the candlelit table, with those green eyes that their daughter had inherited, and waited. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He looked down at her hand, then he turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that for a while. The thing with Voss had resolved. The thing with Renzo had resolved. But the world Dominic moved in did not resolve. It rearranged, reconfigured, presented new pressures and new negotiations, and she understood by now that this was permanent. That she was choosing not just him but the permanent condition of the world he inhabited. She had spent a long time deciding whether she could do that. The decision came quietly, the way the real decisions did. It came on a Sunday morning when Sophia had climbed into bed between them. It was the first time this had happened. The first morning after the first night he had stayed, and the occasion was treated by Sophia with the same matter of fact acceptance with which she treated most logistical arrangements. And Sophia was talking about the fish book, and her plans for the weekend, and Dominic was listening with the complete attention she had come to rely on. And Alara was watching both of them and feeling the weight of the thing she had been resisting slide finally, completely, from her arms. She could not predict what came next. She could not control it. She could not guarantee safety in the absolute way. She had been trying to guarantee it for 5 years, making every choice from the premise that risk could be managed down to nothing if she was careful enough. She could love him. She could let him love them. She could stop managing from fear and start choosing from something better. Dom, Sophia said. Are you going to live here? Alara waited. He turned his head and looked at her. Not Sophia, looked at Alara, with the question in it that was also somehow not a question because the answer was already there in the looking. Do you want me to? He asked, and it was directed at both of them. Sophia said yes, with the immediacy of someone for whom this had been obvious for some time. Alara said yes, with the entirety of a woman who had finally, at cost and through considerable difficulty, arrived at the thing she had always been most afraid to want. He looked at her for a moment longer, and the thing in his face was not power, not control, not the composed professional architecture of who he was in the world. It was just a man, holding something he had not expected and had not deserved and was going to spend the rest of his life being careful with. Okay, he said. He did not move in immediately. They were careful. Careful in the way of people who understood that the thing they were building deserved to be built properly, not rushed, not collapsed under the weight of too much too fast. He stayed more evenings. He was there more mornings. His things appeared gradually in the apartment. A jacket on the hook by the door, a book on the table, the particular coffee he liked in the cabinet, as if by natural accretion rather than decision. Sophia tracked these arrivals with satisfaction. His umbrella is here, she announced one morning. I see that, Alara said. That means he's staying. She ate her cereal. Umbrellas are important. People don't leave their umbrellas. That's very astute. I know. Sophia looked at the umbrella by the door with proprietary approval. I told him he could put his umbrella here. I showed him the hook. Alara looked at the umbrella. She thought about the hook that had been empty for 5 years. She thought about Sophia, 5 years old and already managing her world with the careful competence of someone who had learned that love was a thing you tended, a thing you made space for, a thing you invited in by showing people where the hook was. You did good, she told her daughter. I know, Sophia said. 3 months later, on a Tuesday in January, the anniversary of nothing in particular, Dominic came to dinner and brought flowers, which he rarely did, flowers being slightly outside his usual register, and helped Sophia with the homework about animals that she had been approaching with increasing creativity, and ate the dinner Alara had made, and helped clean up, and then sat on the couch with Sophia reading until she fell asleep between them. When Alara came back from carrying Sophia to bed, he was standing at the window. The city outside was winter, lit, cold and bright. I need to tell you something, he said. She sat on the couch. Tell me. He turned from the window. He looked like he had been rehearsing something, which was unusual. He was not typically a man who rehearsed. He was direct, efficient, usually arrived at the point by the most economical route available. I've been restructuring things, he said. The organization. Over the past few months, moving away from the parts of it that are, he chose words carefully, the parts that don't belong in a life like this one. She was still. It takes time, he said. It takes time and it requires managing. He exhaled. I'm not telling you I'm going to become someone else. I'm telling you that I'm trying to build something that has a door you can walk out of, a door Sophia can walk out of. He looked at her. When she's older and she knows more about the world I come from, I want her to be able to choose. I want you to be able to choose every day, because it's what you want and not because you're in something you can't get out of. Dominic, I'm in love with you, he said. I should have said that first. It's been true for a while and I kept finding reasons to not say it exactly, to say it around the edges instead. He looked at her steadily. I'm in love with you and I'm in love with our daughter and I want to build something real. Not just protect it. Build it. She looked at him by the winter window. She thought about a hotel bar 6 years ago and a conversation about architecture, and a night she had both regretted and been grateful for in alternating measures ever since. She thought about a crayon drawing on a refrigerator. She thought about a small girl in a nightgown with no fear in her voice. She thought about the weight she had set down in the space it had left. Not empty, but open. I love you too, she said. He crossed the room and sat beside her and she leaned against him, and they stayed like that in the winter, lit quiet of the small, clean, real apartment, in the life they had arrived at through chaos and choice and the particular grace of second chances. It was Sophia who decided the timeline. This was not a surprise to anyone. On a Saturday morning in February, she came into the kitchen where they were both making breakfast. A chaotic collaborative endeavor that had become one of Alara's favorite things. The way they moved around each other in the small space. The particular rhythm of two people who were learning the choreography of a shared life. and she set something on the table with the deliberate satisfaction of someone executing a long-held plan. It was a drawing. Red house yellow sun. 3 figures holding hands beneath the exaggerated rays. Beneath the tallest figure, in careful block letters, Dom. Beside him, the medium figure, Mim. Beside her, the small figure, me. I made a new one, Sophia said. The old one was missing someone. Dominic looked at the drawing for a long time. Sophia, he said with a steadiness that required effort. Can I ask you something? She climbed into the chair across from him. Yes, how would you feel, he said, if I was your dad? Officially, not just Dom, who is here a lot. Your actual dad. Sophia looked at him, the gray-green eyes, unguarded, assessing in the way of a child who had inherited both her parents' capacity for evaluating things carefully before committing to them. Are you already my dad? She asked. He looked at Alara. Yes, he said, I am. Then I would feel like you were already my dad, Sophia said with the air of someone closing a logical loop, which is what I feel. Okay, he said. Okay, she agreed. She slid off the chair, took a piece of toast from the plate on the counter, and went to her room. The matter, apparently, was settled. Alara looked at the drawing on the table. She looked at him. She had been thinking for weeks about what she wanted, and she had been thinking about it in the framings she had always used. Practical, careful, what's sustainable, what's real, and she had arrived at an answer that was not practical and not careful and was entirely real. Ask me, she said. I don't have a ring, he said. I don't care about a ring. I have a whole speech planned, he said. I wrote it down. I've been revising it. Dominic. I've been revising it for 3 weeks, he said. It's very thorough. He looked at her across the small kitchen table, in the Saturday morning light, with the drawing of their family between them. Lara, he said. Will you, Les? She said. You didn't let me finish. I don't need you to finish, she said. Yes. Something moved across his face that she recognized now. That thing that used to be sealed off, the thing that had been cracking and softening and opening since the night a 5-year-old girl asked him if he was going to kill them, and he put down the gun. It was, she had come to understand, his real face, the one beneath the architecture. The one that had been waiting all along for somewhere it was safe to appear. He reached across the table and took her hand. Down the hall, Sophia could be heard narrating something elaborate to herself, the ongoing story of a world she was inventing. Brave main characters, logical dragons, a house with enough room for everyone. 6 months later, on a Sunday in August, a small ceremony took place in a garden outside the city. Intimate, unhurried, attended by the people who needed to be there and no one who didn't. Sophia wore a white dress with small blue flowers at the hem, which she had selected personally after intensive deliberation, and she stood between her parents during the exchange of vows with the expression of someone who has been working toward a specific outcome for a long time, and is now observing its satisfactory completion. When the moment came where they were declared to be, officially, a family, Sophia reached up with both hands, one to each of them, and held on. The garden was full of light. The city was somewhere behind them, past the trees, full of its own weight and history. Alara looked at her husband and thought about the night a gun was lowered and a door opened, and the long improbable road that ran between that moment and this one. She thought about everything she had carried and everything she had set down, and the extraordinary ordinary fact of a life shared with people who saw you. Dominic looked at her and she could see, clearly, without effort, the way you see something when the light is right and nothing is obscuring the view. She could see all the way to the real face beneath the architecture, the one that had been waiting for somewhere to live. It had found one. Sophia tugged both their hands simultaneously. Are we done now? She asked. Because I'm hungry and the cafe has the fish. We're done, Dominic said. Finally, Sophia said. She led them both toward the path, and the 3 of them walked into the light, and behind them the ceremony dissolved and the garden resumed its quiet, and the city waited the way it always waited, patient and enormous, for the next story to begin. But this one, for now, was complete. Finn, she asked if he was going to kill them. He put the gun away. Everything else followed from that. Returned to cover.